Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp, and welcome to part 3 in this video series on the meanings of the major arcana in the tarot. I will be covering the cards Temperance through to the World, thus concluding my analysis of the major arcana, and you can watch the previous 2 videos on this topic by following the links in the description below. So if you've always wanted to know what the meaning of the major arcana is in a fair bit of detail, but a fairly brief description, check out those videos together with this one for a complete explanation of those meanings. But now, without further ado, let me jump straight into the meanings of Temperance through to the World. Okay, so here's Temperance, card number 14 in the major arcana in the Rider-Waite deck. This card is all about the skillful and artful balancing and uniting of opposites. It's very reminiscent of the creative process, and it's also very reminiscent of the alchemical process. So Temperance, of course, is one of the 4 classical virtues, and the cards Strength and Justice refer to 3 of the 4, as I mentioned in my last video. And Temperance is all about moderation, being measured and balanced. So it's a card that is inherently about finding a balance between 2 perhaps competing, perhaps complementary forces that one finds oneself between in life or coming under the influence of. So in this card we see a lot of duality, and we see a lot of complementary opposites, and a kind of situating by the being in the middle between the 2, balancing between the 2, not wavering to one or the other extreme. So we have here heaven and earth. Of course, the angel figure is a heavenly being, but they have come down to the earth. We have also 2 cups with the waters being poured from one to the other in a very measured fashion and a very careful fashion. We have the angelic being putting 1 foot on the earth, 1 foot on the land, you might say, and 1 in the water. And we have a kind of androgynous being, which has characteristics of both male and female. Again, a combination of 2 polarities. So if you draw this card in a spread, it could indicate that you're being called to take a measured and balanced approach to things by, if you have competing interests or competing influences in your life, finding the compromise or the balance between them so that you can have a harmonious life that is well curated. Or it can just as easily mean you're about to embark on some creative endeavor, whether it's a creative project like a painting or even a piece of writing or music, which all involves putting together in a harmonious way a number of different elements. All right, next up we've got number 15, and it's our modern society's favorite character. It's the devil. And this card, the meaning is fairly self-explanatory in terms of what the symbolism represents. We have fairly standard symbolism for the devil with the bat wings and the horns and the kind of feet of the satyr there, or the legs of the satyr. But there's a bit more symbolism to unpack here. The kind of stance of the devil here is quite reminiscent of Eliphas Levi's rendition of the Baphomet symbol. That symbol was not intended as a symbol for evil, but it has been appropriated as such, particularly in modern times with LaVeyan Satanism. And you can see as well the satanic imagery here with the inverted pentagram at the top. The upright pentagram is a symbol for the human being, the microcosm. It is a symbol of a perfectly balanced and, in some sense, perfected human being, the human being as they were intended to be, as God intended them to be. And with the inverted pentagram, we see the degradation of that. And so we have also here Adam and Eve as they appeared in the Lovers card in this deck, as indicated by the figures looking the same, but also we have here the fruit of the tree of knowledge, as well as the flame of the tree of life that appeared in the Lover's card. But unlike in that card, which showed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, here we have a picture of humanity in their fallen state. The thing that is noteworthy about the figures in this card is that they are chained to the post that the devil sits upon. But the chains that bind them are not actually that tight around their neck. They could easily remove the bonds if they were so inclined, which suggests that this is not a physical bondage, but a mental or a spiritual bondage. And indeed, that is the way that the spiritual forces of darkness, which control this world, do keep us in bondage. So in its broadest possible meaning, this card is a symbol of the world in which we live. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, the Bible says that Satan is the prince of this world. The devil is the ultimate power, spiritual power that is in control of this world. And, you know, in times past, I might have had to explain that a little bit to people. But in our modern society, the culture is so saturated with evil. I don't even have to really explain it. It's just, you just have to turn on the television. You just have to watch a music video. That's all you have to do. So you can see how this world is really ruled by the vices, ruled by wickedness and sin. You know, but in a non-Western context, this is also talking about what's known as the realm of samsara, which is the realm of perpetual rebirth into physical matter or something other than returning to the divine source. And it's perpetuated by karma, by things that keep us attached to a conditioned reality. The spirit looks for satisfaction by grasping at things in the lower world, and that's what keeps us chained to the lower world. And, you know, this is parallel to the idea of sin, being held in bondage by sin. Because sin fundamentally is grasping after something that satisfies our lower nature. And it's based on a deception, because we really are looking for satisfaction. And every sin that we follow is a distorted virtue of looking for something that is part of the divine plan, but has been distorted and turned into something selfish and individualistic. And so we see the black in the background of this card, representing that this bondage to sin, this bondage to karma, really represents a deception and illusion, presenting what the devil offers as something it's really not. When we are tempted by evil, the temptation is always that, oh, you don't want to follow all of these moralistic rules. If you follow me, if you follow this other way, you can just do whatever you want all the time. But of course, there's different parts of us that want different things. There's the higher part of us, the more conscious part of us that aspires towards divinity and aspires towards higher purpose. And then there's the more base animalistic parts of our nature, which just want to follow the instincts and just follow every passion, no matter how self-destructive or destructive of others that turns out to be. And what the devil does is frees the animal passions, but that ultimately comes at the price of enslaving our higher nature. And that is turning the human being upside down. That's the opposite of how we're supposed to be, which is that our animal nature is tamed by our higher spiritual nature, hence the inversion of the microcosm, the inversion of the upright pentagram. Instead, what we should be looking for, if we want to be freed from bondage, if we want to be liberated, if we want to rebel against the system that is keeping us down, it must be a rebellion against the things of the world and not against the things of the spirit. And that is how we can overcome the deception. But what is it? So that's all very philosophical and it's all very religious, But what does that mean in terms of what drawing this card would mean in an everyday reading? Well, it could mean that you're struggling with some kind of addiction, but short of that extreme, it could just be an unhealthy relationship with worldly things, with things that are, you know, of a sensory nature, that keep us distracted and keep us from, can distract us from more important pursuits in life. So if you draw this card, it may be a warning to that effect, and to look out for those things in your life and think of how you're going to overcome them. As you've probably already gathered from the previous card, there's some real doozies in this part of the Major Arcana. And unfortunately, in the short term, it doesn't get any better, because the next one we have in the series is number 16, the Tower. There's very little that is good about this card. It's a very traumatic card, and it's very destructive and cataclysmic. There can be a silver lining to this card, which I'll explain, but it's the blasted tower. It is something which gave structure and order and consistency to life being suddenly destroyed and throwing everything into disorder. And it's a cause of distress when that happens in our life, when circumstances are upset to that extent. But there's a reason why perhaps the tower is not as negative as it seems on face value. That's because of the nature of the order and the structure that is being destroyed. We see here the crown being knocked off the top of the tower as it's struck, a symbol of worldly authority, the worldly authority that gains its power from the figure in the previous card. And we have here the lightning bolt, which is striking that down, which suggests divine intervention. The lightning bolt traces the progression from the most unmanifest and divine levels of the cosmos in the tree of life, all the way down to Malkut, which is the earth. So we have the descent of the divine into matter for some purpose. In this case, it's a destructive and purgative purpose. And the yods falling from the clouds and from the sky, symbol of God as well. In the great name of the Tetragrammaton, in the Kabbalah, each of the 4 letters of the name represent one of the 4 aspects of God, in one of the Sephiroth each, and Yod represents God the Father. So we have the fatherly principle of God striking down the wicked, and the tower represents the kingdom of wickedness on the world. It represents the Tower of Babel, the first attempt at a world government that human beings made, and it was in opposition to God's plan, and it was ultimately destroyed. And that is really what all wicked systems and wicked structures are. They make a mockery of God, because like God, they seek to unite the world. They seek to unite all in the one. But in doing so, they create a system which completely denies the dignity of the individual and the soul of human life. It's purely utilitarian, purely based on power, and no higher principles than that. And we have, in our own times, an attempt to set something like that up again. And as with all attempts, it will ultimately be destroyed. But in our own lives, in a more kind of immediate sense, drawing this card can mean that there is something in your life that has been a constant, some kind of a structure, something which gives you familiarity, and perhaps once gave you a sense of purpose, gave you a sense of security, which no longer serves you, and which will soon be swept away. If there's a false structure in your life, then that is going to be swept away. And it's going to be scary, and it's going to be unpleasant at times, but ultimately it's for the best, because there will be renewal after that. You'll have a chance to rebuild on the ruins of the old. and everything has its season, and even things that brought us a sense of security once upon a time can cause our life to grow stagnant and can grow corrupt and must eventually be swept away to be replaced with something else. So that's the silver lining of the Tower card. Well, after the heaviness of the previous two cards, I'm very pleased to show you the next one, the Star. So this is a card that is all about hope and inspiration. Just the thing we needed following the foreboding atmosphere that was set by the Devil and the Tower cards. So we see here a number of key symbols. There is the woman in a state of innocence, like Eve in the Lovers card, representing a return to innocence, a return to that kind of that positive relationship with the universe. And we see here that she bears similarities to the symbol of Aquarius, the water bearer. And so a lot of Aquarian symbolism comes through this card. If you think about what the sign of Aquarius means, it can refer to a personality which can be quite visionary, can look to the future in a positive sense. Someone who's a humanitarian who wants to create a better world. And if you think about the age of Aquarius that's coming, it's very much expected to be a return to a more spiritual way of being, a better way of being than the kind of chaos and darkness that humanity currently finds itself in. So all very hopeful and inspirational kinds of ideas that are signified by the Aquarian symbolism here. And of course we have the Star, which is the central symbol of the card. If you think about what the symbolism of the Star is, it represents divine beings, beings of light, who appear in this form quite often. And it represents their intervention into the world to change it for the better, or at least to act as a guiding light for the people who will change it. So again, it's a portent, it's a sign that things are going to get better, that a new age is upon us, a better time is on the horizon. And you just have to think about the story of the three magi and the birth of Christ, and how that was seen as a sign of the coming of the kingdom of God. So all very hopeful symbolism. If you draw this card, it means you're going to feel very inspired, very uplifted, in a spiritual sense, perhaps in a creative sense, and it means that you should look forward to the future, because there's some good things for you there, and it's going to come from you. You're going to feel revivified in some sense. We see the water being poured onto the earth to nourish it, to prepare for the coming of new life. So you're preparing for better times ahead in your own life. And we have the symbol of Thoth here, the ibis perched on the tree, a symbol of wisdom. So lean into the wisdom that you will receive in this period in your life. Okay, here we have the moon, which is number 18. Depending on the context, this can be a bit of a foreboding card, but not necessarily. It represents the moon, as is obvious from the title and the main symbol, but there's a lot to unpack in terms of what the moon symbolizes. The moon can be regarded as a symbol of the unconscious. It can be regarded as a symbol of the world of dreams, perhaps the underworld. But at the same time, it can signify in our inner world fantasy or delusion, perhaps even mental illness. So it takes us into the non-rational part of our consciousness, and perhaps the not completely illuminated by the light of consciousness part of our mind. And it can be important to navigate that part of us from time to time to find what's hidden there, to bring it into the light. But we can also get lost there, and that can be the thing that leads to us having a mental state that is less than ideal. So that's the warning of this card. Besides the moon, we have the waters, again representing the unconscious, the crustacean emerging from the water representing the astrological sign of Cancer, which is a very watery sign, very associated with the emotions, and very connected to the unconscious in its own way. We see two dogs here. They appear to be almost wolf-like, howling at the moon. This can represent that kind of untamed animal nature that is, in touch with the movements, the ebbs, the tides of the unconscious, and is sort of moved by them. In some of the older decks, the two dogs are fighting each other. It might bring to mind the story of the two wolves that we all have inside us, the black and the white, representing the good and the bad aspirations of our nature, and the one that we feed is the one that will predominate. But I think in the case of the moon card, it's probably more than likely two black wolves. It represents a mind that is divided against itself. And so that's something to watch out for. I mean, that is the state that we all live in, and coming to that realization is the first step in healing that. But it's not the way that we should be, and it's not a state that we want to stay in. If we're exploring our shadow, doing shadow work, if we're experiencing a long dark night of the soul, it's important to acknowledge that, but we need to be able to pull ourselves out of the abyss afterwards. So that is the main warning of this card. If you're entering a period where you're stuck in your own unconscious, where things are coming up, then just navigate that situation, but do so responsibly. And also this can represent psychic powers. The moon card, we might be coming into some kinds of cities or faculties of a clairvoyant nature. But again, the same warning applies. Be careful what you let in if you're becoming more sensitive in that way. Okay, the next one is the sun. This is number 19, a very happy, cheerful, optimistic kind of a card. We have the sun, fairly straightforward symbolism there. We have the child, who represents our own inner child, another symbol of a kind of return to innocence, or at the very least, a kind of return to the happy, optimistic, joyful state that we had as a child, before the world taught us to harden our hearts. And the symbol of the child is also a symbol of the Christ child, which is also a solar symbol. We see the motif of the mother with the child that we see with the Virgin Mother and the Christ child replicated in earlier times with, say, Isis and Horus, the sun god. So the child has for thousands of years been an archetype for that principle of new birth, of the return of life to the world. And it's a symbol of triumph, of happy times, of reasons to be optimistic. We see the banner of one who's returning victorious from battle, held by the child. And we also can think of the characteristics of Apollo, the sun god here. Apollo was not just the god of the sun in Greek mythology, he was also the god of healing, the god of song as well, of music. So very much a good times deity. And so that is what is being signified by the card here. You feel a renewed sense of life returning to you, and you feel like you're in good times. And there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. So good for you. Okay, next we have number 20, the Judgment card. A lot of people feel trepidation when they see this card, when they think of the Last Judgment. But it's actually a very positive card. This is again a symbol of renewal and new life. So the Last Judgment in the Bible refers to a time when those who are righteous are raised from the dead, and given new, glorified, eternal bodies, with which to dwell with the Most High for all time. And, if we lead a spiritual life or even just a moral life, then there will be times where we feel that we have been glorified, that we have been resurrected into a type of new life that is much closer to the divine, that doesn't have the same sorts of problems that it used to have when we were stuck in the kinds of situations that were in before, that was reinforcing some really negative beliefs and some negative things in our life. So if you draw this card, it represents some kind of a new beginning for you into a new, more positive situation than you were in before. But the caveat to that is that it is preceded by some kind of a reckoning with something. There is some serious karma that you have that you've been putting off dealing with for a long time, and you're going to have to face it, and it's going to have to resolve itself one way or another for you to be able to move on into the next stage. That is the meaning of the final judgment. It is a time when even those who have been dead for centuries must account for their actions. If there is something in your life that you've been putting off dealing with, that's going to come to light eventually, you're going to have to work through and take responsibility for, even if it feels bad to acknowledge it, then that may well be the thing that you need to do in order to reach this new chapter in your life. But it will be fantastic once you get to the other side. And that brings us to number 21, the world. This is the last of the major arcana, and appropriately enough, it is very much a symbol of completion. It represents the ultimate climax. It represents finally reaching an end goal that you've been working towards for a long time, and upon reaching that, the whole world opens up to you. The horizons of the world card are really very expansive. We have, again, the 4 cherubs that have appeared in multiple cards in the major arcana, representing the expansiveness of all the universe. So if you draw this card, really, the world is your oyster. You've reached your goal, and now the world is your oyster in terms of making the most of what you have gained. The figure in the middle of the world card is dancing, is very jubilant, very celebratory, and they hold the familiar symbol of the wand, holding 2 wands in this case. So the symbol of manifesting your desires, of that which you wanted to manifest finally coming into being, really being emphasized here. And we have the wreath around the woman here, very reminiscent of the symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, a symbol of the infinite order, again, of the expansiveness of the universe for those who are open to its gifts. And also reminiscent of the Vesica Piscis, another quite ubiquitous symbol in Western esotericism around the world is the woman in that shape, inside that shape, enclosed by that shape. It's a symbol of the divine feminine. It's a very abundant card, a very positive card. So well done if you draw this. But that brings us to the end. That is the major arcana in a nutshell. So thank you for listening, and all the best if you are studying tarot, if you're trying to learn to read tarot. Hopefully this video and the previous 2 will be of some help to you. I've also done videos on the meanings of the number cards, which you'll find on my channel. I'll do some videos on the meanings of the court cards at some point, but not for a while. I want to take a break from tarot now and just focus on some other things that people might be interested in. But if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel. If you want to really support me, you can also subscribe to my Odyssey. But thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.